I'll introduce Arunav Sinha, who's going to be moderating this discussion. Arunav translates Bengali, classic, modern, and contemporary fiction, non-fiction, poetry, and children's books from Bangladesh and India into English. 52 of his translations have been published so far. He won the Crossword Award for Best Translated Book twice for Sanskar's Chaurangi and Anita Agnihotri's 17. He's the book's editor of Scroll. He's going to be engaging in this discussion with Keshav Rai, Jeel Gandhi, Sanchi Saxena, Ranveer Soni, and Arya Parekh. A warm round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, thank you. I'm just going to stand because I feel very inadequate with so many bright people here. Couple of corrections. There are no kids here. There's today's generation, and then there are oldies like ourselves. We are yesterday's generation. How many parents in the audience? Oh dear. This is going to be interesting. It's going to be much fun tonight in certain homes. Okay, I'm just going to start by asking the people here to very quickly introduce themselves, tell us the one interesting thing about themselves that their parents don't know. Yeah, that's important, okay? You must reveal something that your parents don't know, and then we'll get on to the discussion itself.
I think
okay.
You should start, because I don't know what my parents know about.
Okay, we'll start from the right. No, I don't think your mic's working. Just, let me see. Okay. Go for it. No.
I'm Ranveer Soni. I love to read. I read a lot of whodunits. I like reading crime stories, as it were. I find them very interesting.
Okay. Hi, Ranveer.
Hi.
You still haven't told us what we don't know.
Well, I don't do anything that my parents don't know, actually.
I don't believe that, but we'll let it be.
Hi, I'm Jeel, and I'm studying economics. That's by far the most interesting thing about me, but because my parents don't really know whether I'm studying or not. So, studying economics.
You guys have to do better than that. I mean, this is something even we used to say.
Save time. Hi, I'm Keshav. I like to read a lot as well. I also like to watch a lot of films. Favorite authors, probably James Joyce, John Steinbeck. Films, lots of films. Usually ones that I'm not allowed to watch, like maybe 15s. I'm not sure if you 15s, 8s. I don't know. Point is that I enjoy films and books, and yeah, something that my parents don't know about me. That's tough. Mostly things that they don't know about me, I don't really want to tell them. So this is something. Yeah, let's just say I like to live life on the edge. Let's make that an easy one. I wake up at 8:20, 10 minutes before I have to go to lessons in school. So yeah, I'm a rebel.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Sanchi. I'm studying psychology and anthropology.
Say it right. You just taught me a term.
Oh yeah, sorry. Psychanthro. So one thing my parents don't know about me is there are a lot of things I wouldn't like to say.
Yeah, say it.
Let's just
Okay, think about it.
yeah, I'll think about it here.
Hi, I'm Arya, and despite having had all this time to think, my parents are sitting there, so I don't think I want to say it, because then they'll know it.
Yeah, so I just want to tell you guys that what you've just shown us is censorship in action. Each of you has censored something about yourself, right? That you don't want others to know. So is that a good thing or a bad thing? Come on, tell me quickly.
See, my censorship isn't like causing a breach of public safety or something. It's just so that I can go home and eat dinner on the table with them without them grilling me.
Okay. So you agree censorship is good as long as it saves you but doesn't create disruption in the lives of others? Yeah?
Not necessarily. I think that censorship should be there, and it shouldn't necessarily be for you and not for others. That's quite a grey area because you can't really always tell. But I think that everyone has a right to censorship, personal censorship, things that maybe they don't want to say. Again, it's not a breach of public safety. At least I don't think so. I'm not sure if my parents would explode with anger and rage and sadness if I said something that they don't know. But I think everyone has a right to censorship, and although we shouldn't necessarily consider that it's good for us and everyone else, we shouldn't just forget about them.
So what is censorship to you?
To me, it's this form of suppression that kind of is culture specific. So it's something that will differ from culture to culture. What is vulgar, what is obscene is differing for every society. So if censorship has to exist, which I think it has to in some form and degree, it has to exist keeping in mind these culture specifications.
So why you think it has to exist? Yeah. Okay, guys, don't wait for me. Don't look at me. Just jump in. My only request, as I said, was don't talk at the same time. Put your hand up, kill the other person, smash your hand on their face and talk, but let only one voice be heard.
So I'll just like to add to jail. I think censorship isn't only about prohibition or control. It's also about perpetuating this way of thinking, this way of behaving. So say for instance, if they censored a scene that showed a woman drinking and smoking, that also perpetuated the fact that women shouldn't do it because it's insulting to their dignity or whatever. So that way they're actually dictating this discourse that this is the right way of behaving in a public sphere, or this is the way we want the public to think and act. So it's not only about control, it's also productive in this way because it's proposing this one particular view that they think is right.
So censorship also depends on the time that you're living in. What might have been unacceptable to show the public in the 1950s is perfectly acceptable today. And if you actually look at things that were censored in the past, and if the five of us watch it, we'll wonder why they censored it because it's so okay to behave like that now. So initially, like kissing and stuff, if you look at Hindi, like Bollywood movies, even now they're so reluctant to show a kiss. But I'm sure my generation, if we saw two people kissing on screen, would not riot or, cry or any violent, form of expressing ourselves after watching that. So it's also really subjective to the time. And I feel like none of us oppose censorship. All we oppose is senseless censorship where they censor it for absolutely no reason. Like we were discussing James Bond and how the hashtag Sanskari James Bond came up because they censored Spectre.
So quick straw poll. Everybody believes that some form of censorship should exist? Yes or no?
Some censorship should exist, but only if mass public interest is involved.
Right.
So there should be censorship, but only till a certain limit. There shouldn't be arbitrary censorship, like as we all said in James Bond. But if there is a topic which can cause sectarian violence or public unrest, it should be censored.
So if, let's say, tomorrow an organization were formed saying the Society for Not Allowing People to Kiss Longer than 10 Seconds. Yeah, it can happen, right? And there are enough of them, and they come out on the roads and they say, we are going to perpetuate violence because you're allowing 20-second kisses. So should the 20-second kiss be cut down to 10 seconds, or should it continue for 20 seconds? There can be violence, right? There can be mayhem.
I feel like in a country like India where everyone's so diverse, and even within, like if you look at it, forget religion, but even within a religion, there are so many different socio-economic backgrounds that people find so many different things acceptable and unacceptable. You really need to be careful about what you think should be censored and what shouldn't be censored. So though I may personally think that a 20-second kiss is fine, maybe my domestic help may not feel the same way. I may feel that a kiss at all before marriage is not cool. So I feel like it really depends person to person, which is why you can't can't have a blanket censorship law. It has to be situation to situation.
Okay, so I think this is something I struggle with because censorship usually boils down to a select few watching, say, a certain movie and passing a judgment on behalf of everybody else. But at the same time, if we need a censorship, we'll need a certain lawmaking body, we'll need someone to do that. So this is something I always struggle with because how can that select few represent, like she said, the diverse population of India? So this is something that's still a little unresolved for me. That we do need a certain censorship, but who is going to pass the laws? Who is going to pass those judgments?
So who is? What's the answer to that?
That I haven't answered that yet. So
What's the answer?
So currently we
Because
have.
if you say there's censorship has to be there, then you also have to tell us who the censors will be. Assuming it's not Pehlaj Nialni.
So yeah, there have to be artists who understand what it means to put up a pure form of art without censoring it. And they have to be people who are not influenced like the current censor board chief is, who don't get influenced that easily by political inclinations and affiliations. That's
Okay.
what I feel.
Like
Again,
someone like you. No, really. I mean, someone who's in with the time, someone who knows what's acceptable, what's not. Young people who are totally on the cutting edge of tolerance and acceptability.
Perhaps.
Do you consider yourself very open to all kinds of weirdness? Would you clamp down on weirdness if you see it somewhere?
I don't know about that, but I think that the right to choose of what you want to see and what you don't want to see, what you want to consume and what you don't want to consume, should remain with the individual. So the person censoring it has no right to tell you that this is something you shouldn't be consuming.
Then what should the censor do?
Without, imposing their views, giving us what they think will not cause law and order issues or will not result in some kind of turmoil.
Okay. What do you think?
Well, I think that each case is subjective. Each one carries its own social background. So, for example, I could be watching a film and I could see some profanity, and it's fine in that case because it's in a film. But at the same time, if I'm going around and I'm telling people, and I'm not saying that I would, but if I'm swearing at people, I would consider that unacceptable. But each case
To
is
whom?
different.
Unacceptable to whom?
To the person who's being insulted and the people around. But like that, each case is subjective. In a film, it's fine because it's not really offensive to anyone watching. But if you're doing it on the street and if you're going around swearing at people, it is offensive to people because it's insulting. It could be degrading. But that's just one of the few examples, and there are just so many different examples.
Sure. So let's say if you saw behavior like that in a public space and you stopped it, would you consider that a form of censorship or just good civic sense?
Well, I think in that sense it would really be a sense of perspective here. I would think that I'm doing the right thing by stopping it, but the person who I'm stopping might have different views. So they might be more liberal in a sense. They might think that they have a higher right to freedom. So they might think that it's censorship. So it's really based on opinion. And the best way to do it is to find the opinion that's acceptable to most people, or universal opinion, rather than just acceptable to certain kinds of people or certain countries.
So if you have to find a position that's acceptable to most people, how do you find it?
On Twitter.
Sorry?
The Twitter trends.
So let's say again to go back to that 20-second kiss, what should be done is that the clip should be put up on Twitter and people should be asked to vote.
No, but you can't do that because that excludes so much of the population of the country. Where sitting here is very privileged people who have the exposure to be able to watch a movie with violence, to be able to watch a Bollywood movie where there's an item song and think that it's not okay to objectify women even after that. But there have been so many cases where men think that it's okay to objectify women based on what they've seen on TV and what they've seen in movies, which is why I feel like we can't really provide that kind of perspective because we have the maturity to be able to deal with this. It all boils down to awareness and how much you know and how much you can deal with, which is why I feel like the Indian censor board caters to the lowest common denominator, and they try to stop that by censoring what the common Indian man can't deal with. And it's not really fair at one level because, like I said, there's so much variance in the socio-economic levels and the awareness levels that everyone has that it's very hard to come up with a censorship law that will appeal to everyone.
So what do you think are the things that the common Indian man can't deal with?
So, for starters, the men thought that it was okay to wolf whistle at women because Bollywood actresses would kind of dress very scantily.
can't deal with
and
that.
Yeah, they
What do they do?
don't. Since it's something they're not used to seeing, it became an excuse to objectify women, and then they say that they're asking for it because if they can go and do an item number that's going to be viewed by over a few 100 million people, it's okay to do that then.
So to prevent a man from objectifying a woman, the woman must dress in a way that does not provoke
I feel
him.
like what needs to be done is to educate and make more aware the masses, because that's the only way that we can progress into a society where they can view these things without revolting to them. The only thing that I feel should be censored is anything that can cause national unrest. Like there's a movie Parzania based on the Gujarat riots, which wasn't shown in Gujarat because it would lead to backlash from the communities because it was them being portrayed. And so I think that that's perfectly okay. What I don't think is okay is taking out a kissing scene from a movie or, censoring Spectre, since we discussed that earlier.
To add to what she just said, I think what is happening currently is that censorship is being equated with moral policing, which is what should not be done in my opinion. Because if you really want to instill morality, censoring is not the way out. You probably educate and you probably use educational institutions to do that. So censorship should not really mean moral policing.
Censoring is basically like taking your problem, putting it in a drawer, locking the drawer and saying the problem doesn't exist. It's not really solving the problem.
Okay, that's great. Anything to add to that? Yeah.
Censorship is like a way of indirectly telling someone what to do and what not to do. Instead of saying it indirectly, they should, in a very direct manner, tell the public what should be done, what should not be done, like through educational institutions.
Okay. Yeah, go on.
But surely that could lead to some form of oppression, because if they're directly telling the public, do this or don't do this, some of them will feel that this isn't right, some of them will feel it's fine, some of them will be, or on the extreme side, will be totally against it and fight that. Some of them will just really do as asked. I mean, we can see it in China. It's they tell the public, you can do this, you can do this, you can't do this. There's so many people fighting back, but there's so many people who are accepting it, and there's so many people with conflicted feelings. It doesn't quite work by directly telling people, does it?
Okay. So far we've only talked. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. I think it's a very paternalistic way of doing things. It's like, okay, I know what's best for you, so I will dictate what you can and can't watch, and I know that you or this particular community will get offended by something, and because I'm at the top, so I will not let you go through that. So it's like you're trying to keep them safe, you're trying to keep them in this bubble that, okay, we will protect you, you'll be offended with this, we know this, so we'll protect you and we won't let this be seen. So I think that's very problematic.
Okay. So I know what's best for you. That's why, beta, you should study science. I know what's best for you. That's why you should marry this man. I know what's best for you. That's why you should study in this college. So are these all forms of censorship? Do your parents censor you? Not you specifically.
But definitely, because censorship is basically curtailing someone's rights, their own views, and where I want to go to college, who I want to marry, what I want to study, what I want to do with my life, are all very personal views that they're things that you have to be content with for the rest of your life. So unless you get to make that decision more than censorship, if anything goes wrong, your parents don't want to be in a situation where you turn around and blame them because you got a divorce in 20 years or something like that. So it is censorship of your personal freedom.
Okay. And are you for it or against it?
Against
Because I've heard you guys say that you think some form of censorship should exist. Should this form exist?
I'm against parental supervision, kind of.
Okay.
I think it depends, because most of the times that sort of a censorship is well intentioned. I'm pretty sure parents don't maliciously make their children make a decision that they know will harm, their lives.
Except when they're insisting you eat salad. That is malicious.
So again, it's a very thin line, because I know I'm kind of contradicting my earlier statement, because yes, they are being a little paternalistic, protective, but again, it depends on where it's coming from. If it has good intentions, then okay, why not?
Also, I think adding to what she said about it depends from where it's coming from. When the state does it, it's different, and when your parents are doing it, it's different. So that's the distinction that I'd personally like to make.
Okay, so just pausing to tell you that one of the best known sayings that we use is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It always is, right? So you're saying that censorship from parents is acceptable but not from the state, because the state is not your parent and the parent is not the state.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, like she said, the intentions. I'm not saying the state doesn't hold those kind of intentions. It's just different when it's in the personal space, and it's different when it's in the public sphere.
So how is, I mean, I understand that, but how is the response different? How do each of you react to parental censorship or attempted parental censorship? Because I'm sure you don't let them censor you, since you wouldn't tell us what they don't know about you. And state censorship.
Right, so,
Do you react differently? I mean, you download the movies, for
I
example.
mean, yeah, definitely. There are so many Hindu kids who aren't allowed to eat beef, but when the state told them like that they couldn't eat beef, there was so much more of an uproar.
Yeah.
It's not nice for someone outside your house to tell you what you can and cannot do, because you struggle so much with the people inside your house telling you what you can and cannot do, that when outside people who don't know you from Adam tell you what you should be doing, it's not cool. So
Yeah. Okay. So, but what do you do? What do you do when your parents are trying to censor your well-intentioned elderly people in the family who've been there and done it all?
I
and
mean,
know
I
what's
guess you
best,
do rebel.
Which is why they're such losers now. Tell you what you should be doing.
It depends, really. If I think we're at this age where we're sort of in the middle of maturity. We're mature enough to understand when they're saying something that's right, but at the same time, we can understand when they're saying something that's wrong and a bit naggy and a little bit annoying and unfair. But I think because we have this personal relationship, we can understand that and we can deal with it appropriately. Obviously, we all make mistakes. In my case, I think more so the parents and the kids, because they don't trust them as much. But it's different because we understand each other, and it's more of a personal bond. We know what's good for each other because we've lived with each other for such a long time. It's different to the state where they're trying to generalize it for everyone else, and everyone else is different, but when you're in a family, it's a lot smaller. So it's kind of, you know what's good for this one, you know what's good for this one, because there's only about, on average, 4 to 5 people. At least in my family is only 4 people, so you can kind of tell when the parents are telling you the right thing and when you're telling them the right thing.
Okay.
also in a family, you tend to have similar mindsets because you do inherit a lot of the way you think from what your parents find acceptable. So chances are what they find unacceptable, though you may be a lot more progressive just by virtue of living in a more liberal time, you'll still kind of be almost on the same wavelength as them. But like I said, the state isn't just looking out for people who think like you. They're looking out for a huge range of people. So what they may feel is okay to do and not do might not personally coincide with your ideologies.
So it doesn't feel like censorship.
Yeah.
Because you're already halfway there.
Yeah, I mean, you've grown up, your parents have shaped the way you think, and at some level they've, at a very young age, encouraged certain habits and discouraged certain habits. So if my parents did want me to become a professional dancer, they would have put me into dance classes from a young age. I probably would have loved it by the time I was 18 and decided that I wanted to be a dancer all on my own. But the state doesn't have that kind of involvement with each person, so it does seem a lot worse coming from someone so impersonal.
So what if the state started using parents as censors? Suppose they hired parents to censor their kids. Would that be acceptable?
No.
Why not? Your parents know you well.
But the state is still intending to pass on a general agenda. They're just doing it through
No,
the
no, I'm
parents.
saying that they hire parents to customize the
You
agenda
can't
for
do
each
that
family.
because censorship technically is like a blanket rule. If you can't kiss for 20 seconds, you can't kiss for 20 seconds. It's not like in this house you can kiss for 20 seconds, in this house you can't kiss at all, for this house you can kiss for 5 seconds. So censorship by nature needs to be situation to situation, but the way it's implemented is a blanket rule. So the state, there's no way that they can tell parents to censor you because, again, unless it's like this huge thing that they start where from a young age everyone's kind of like fed into this machine where they all come out to be variations of the same person, in which case you lose individuality at all.
Okay, I'm just going to take a brief pause to do a straw poll with the audience, and then we'll change tack a bit afterwards. I want to ask you, those of you who are parents or belong to the generation of parents of the young people here, do you feel that these 5 people as representative of a generation are more against or more open to censorship than you are? More or less? Do you think you are more open to censorship, or are these kids more open to censorship? Let's hear those who are saying that you think you are more open to censorship. No? I mean, is this generation more against censorship or more for it than you are? What do you think?
I was actually surprised. I would have thought that this generation would have been more
Against it.
but I'm hearing more acceptance.
Yeah.
When I was your age, it was no way.
Far less accepting of these things.
But I feel like that's also because we're far less affected by censorship. Like, for example, whatever has technically been taken down or isn't allowed to exist, what we're not allowed to view, we still can because of the internet. The AIB roast was taken down at the beginning of the year, but I watched it 2 weeks ago. So
essentially we have access to the things that
We
the
should
censor board tries to curb our access from. So there is really no impact, like she said.
Yeah, but that's just a limited
That's in
kind
one
of.
sphere,
That's
but still.
films and maybe books and so on. But we're talking about censorship of life, right? Yes. Right. So let me ask each of you a question now, and I want answers from each of you. Are there things that you see out in the world that you would like to censor? Behavior, choices, things that you wish weren't there and you would like, if you had the power, you would say, I'm not going to allow this. If you had the power, what would you not allow in the world? Who'll go first?
the only thing I wouldn't allow is intolerance, because essentially that is what censorship is.
You're intolerant about intolerance.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, but it's because of intolerance that people feel the need to censor. If everyone could just look at things from like a holistic perspective and not from like their blinkered vision.
What do you think intolerance is, and tolerance for that matter?
Intolerance is basically not being accepting of something that's foreign to you. If, like, very personally, I feel like there's nothing wrong with homosexuality despite being straight, but there are so many straight people who hate, like, who can't fathom the concept of homosexuality, which I find alien, and I am intolerant towards their intolerance.
So, do you think intolerant and tolerant are the right words? Because don't they automatically imply that this is bad, but I'll somehow live with it?
I mean, it doesn't
Isn't
necessarily...
it a value judgment?
It doesn't have to be bad. You could just be intolerant to what's different, more than what's bad.
Are you intolerant of the sunshine?
No.
You can't be, right? It's
Yeah.
not a bad thing.
But some people could be.
Yeah.
I mean, you never
Okay,
know.
sure. Okay. All right. Yes. So so intolerance is what you would ban.
Actually, no, I had a point to make about the tolerance debate. I think being tolerant, it's kind of a very idealistic state, because when you say someone is tolerant, that leaves no scope for any debate, right? Because when you say you're tolerant, that means you accept each and every point of view. no matter how differing, no matter how opposing. So there's no scope for debate, there's no scope for argument. So it's a very idealistic state. So I think I agree. I think I'm okay with being intolerant towards certain things. I can't call myself as tolerant because I don't think that's possible.
Maybe open-minded is a better word to describe what I was looking for, because it's fine if after hearing reason about why the other side of the story is acceptable, if after hearing it you make an informed decision not to agree with it but to still coexist with it, I think that's cool. Like I don't agree with people who refuse to hear any side of the story. And even like with my parents at home with their censorship, whenever they tell me I can't do something, I'll make it a point to sit down with them to understand why they think I shouldn't do it, and only if I agree with their reason will I abide by their rule. Otherwise we'll work out some sort of compromise where what I feel is correct is taken into account.
Are your parents here?
Yeah, you can ask them.
Is that the truth? Wow. That's great. That's great. Okay.
I just wanted to add to what they were saying. So, what I think, the way I would interpret tolerance is just having the ability and the patience to listen to the other side. It's not really about, agreeing with everything that they say, that the opposing view says, but just listening to them and then making, like she said, an informed decision or an informed choice.
Okay. So, is censorship essentially an act of intolerance?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
For example, if let's take the Spectre example again, what they could have done in that case was release the film, and people that know us better personally, they would decide for us, if for younger viewers, if they want them to see them, they will decide what they want us to see, how we develop, and that I think makes more sense to me. But censoring in general is a form of intolerance, because it just points out that I don't like them kissing, I don't like the scenes, I'm going to ban them, I'm not going to really go along with it. I think there shouldn't be things like that. I feel like people should be able to make up their own minds, and so in that way, yeah, it is intolerance.
So when you talk about the possibility of public unrest or a law and order problem, is that then not also a form of when I say I don't want this to happen because it might lead to a law and order problem, is that a genuine fear, or is it also just a clever way of stating my intolerance?
There's no transparency in censorship. So last week I was chairing a seminar on freedom of speech at my school, and we tried Googling the parameters for censoring a movie and they're not available. So just that lack of transparency, I feel, makes it okay for the government to get away with a lot of things. So one of the solutions that we thought of in that committee was different censorship for unrestricted audiences and restricted audiences. Because if it's a restricted audience, if you're buying a ticket or if you're making an effort to be at a place to hear someone speak or to watch something or just to believe anything, then it's a personal choice. So I feel like all that needs to be done is a more comprehensive rating guideline instead of just like PG-13 and R and stuff. If you say that it's R because of X, Y, Z, and that's made known to the public, then I can choose for myself whether I want to be in a movie that has maybe a sex scene. But if they make that choice for me, it's not really fair.
Okay, let me take an example that we often encounter in life. Let's say you have a housing society and the people who've set it up decide that they're only going to accept vegetarians over there. Now, do you consider that an acceptable choice, or is it a form of censorship?
I think that's acceptable because I think it's their private sphere. They own the land, they own the buildings. And so a lot of institutions like restaurants or clubs, it's up to them to allow certain people to come in or not. So here, as long as it's a private sphere, I think it's acceptable.
Okay, everyone agrees?
Yeah, it's like colleges having dress codes. You follow
Yeah,
rules.
let's talk about that.
So that's a part of the college rule book, and when you get admission, it's something you agree to comply with. So you abide by what the rule says.
It's still a choice that you're making. So I go to a Christian school, I go to church more than I go to a temple despite being Hindu. And that's a personal choice that I've made and that my family's made to be in that school. I could just as easily go to a school where this wasn't imposed on me. So in that same way, you can go find another complex to live in if you want to eat meat. It's their personal choice as well. You can't encroach on someone else's freedom.
Yeah, so if a institution says that if you have to use our services, you have to follow the rules we've set and follow the restrictions. So that's not a form of censorship of
No,
any
because
kind.
you have the choice to say no.
You can
Okay.
move to another institution.
Right, you can move to another institution. Then why do you object to the censor board when it comes to films? You
Because they don't
another
give you
film.
that choice. They
You can
make
watch
it for
another
you.
film.
But you want to watch that film. Like I study ISC. I can go to another ISC school that's not a Catholic school and I can get the same education there. Just in the same way, if I live in this residential complex, they say you can only eat vegetarian food. If I want to eat meat, I can shift. It's my choice. The censor board is saying that this is the exact movie that you want to watch, but you can't watch it because, hey, you're not ready for this kind of
So you're
content.
saying that in a private space, it is okay to encroach on a person's freedoms.
But you're not encroaching on a person's
Yeah,
freedom
if you
in
tell
a
me that I
private
can't
space.
eat, if you're dictating my choice of food, are you
But
not
you have
encroaching?
every choice to not be part of that society.
No, correct. But in that private space, you're saying that I must adhere to a general set of guidelines on my personal freedom. What I eat, maybe what I wear, maybe
I mean,
what
some
language
sort
I
of
speak.
rule is required because otherwise we just descend into anarchy.
But are you saying rules that conflict with personal freedom are okay?
I think, but that's lawmaking, right? Lawmaking is based on that assumption that you take away certain rights. Say, if we didn't have laws, people would be free to roam around murdering everyone. But because there's certain laws set in the constitution, and you're a citizen of that country, you can't do that. So that's the basic foundation of lawmaking, of rule making.
Of the
That-
existence of the state, that you
you
give
curtail
up
certain
some of
freedom
your
and rights.
freedoms for the state to come into existence so that there is a sovereign authority to look after your larger needs.
Otherwise, technically, it's also censorship that we can't roam around killing people, but at some level, like that's required. You can't
Yeah.
roam around naked again,
But
that's
really
required.
the reason you can't roam around killing people is not because you're breaking the law, but because you're encroaching,
Again, you're encroaching on someone else's
because you're
personal
encroaching on someone's freedom to live.
Yeah.
Yeah. So any law that contradicts with a personal freedom is a bad law. It can be taken to court and it can be struck
No,
down.
but even personal freedom, like in all our civics textbooks when we were learning about freedom of speech and expression, the one example they always use is you can't roam around screaming fire, fire, because that
Sorry, you can't
you
roam
can't
around?
roam around screaming fire. Like if I walked outside and screamed fire, everyone would panic, and there was no need to panic. So there are even freedom of speech and expression have their limitations. You can't just do whatever you want and pass it off as freedom of speech and expression. I think what we're trying to say is that you need to have it within reason. So long as it makes sense, we will agree to it. But where it's senseless and it just encroaches on freedom for the sake of encroaching on freedom because they think that we're not ready to make choices, which we feel that we are, that isn't okay.
I think there's a sense of morality there as well. You said that we can't go around killing people because the law prohibits it, but I think there's also a sense of morality there because I certainly I certainly wouldn't want to go around and kill my fellow man. But of course, there are exceptions, people with no real moral compass. But I think those rules are based on morality's sake, so they're not really conflicting with people's personal freedoms because we kind of have that connection with each other on a human level. There's that certain understanding that we shouldn't take someone's life because it's just wrong. We feel that it's wrong. We can't necessarily explain why. Maybe because they're just like us, but we just feel that it's wrong. So there's also a sense of morality there. However, if there's no real sense of morality, or if it's just something irrelevant, like let's talk about the beef ban quickly.
Yeah.
That was just kind of irrelevant. There was no need for that. It wasn't based on how, on a fundamental level, we feel about each other. It was based on, I think, a religious level, and specifically, if we consider the fact that India used to take pride that it was a secular country, that is unacceptable, and it's just not morally right. You can't really tell someone what they can or cannot eat.
But then, extrapolating from your argument, could a government not just say go and live in another state if you don't like the rules here? Why would the people of the state object
Yeah,
to that?
but India, like he said, prides itself on being a democratic country. It's in our preamble, the fact that we're a secular nation, and we, as the largest democracy, should take into account everyone's views. By that logic, you should also ban pork and everything else that other religions find sacred. We think that censorship with reason is okay. If they told us that we couldn't eat beef because, like when they banned Maggie, it annoyed a lot of people. But once we realized that they basically took it out of circulation because of the high lead levels, I don't think anyone had an issue because it was harming us. Here, if they tell us that we can't eat beef because it's, say, pumped with hormones which are resulting in XYZ, then I'm sure all of us, even though it might annoy us, we would have lived with it without causing the kind of uproar that we did. All that we object to is senseless censorship where they tell us that we can't do something just because.
So, what's not okay in a state is okay in a private housing society.
It's a much smaller level. It offends far fewer
But for
people.
those people, it's their lives. Maybe it's only 50 people. But for those 50 people, it's still at 4 meals a day or 3 meals a day. How does it become right at that level when it's not okay at a higher level? Think about it.
Yeah.
You may not have
No.
an answer right now.
Yeah, but...
Yeah. No, it's a tricky thing. I mean, it's tricky.
But again,
yeah.
you can't have a blanket law, right? That's,
Yeah.
I think, what all of us based our arguments on.
Do any of you have an absolute position on censorship? Because mostly what I'm hearing from each of you is that it must be there within reason.
You
But
can't
does any of you say no, it should not be there at all?
You can't really have an absolute position. I don't think no one can unless it's a rare case where you think a little more extremely than others. But there's just so many contrasting things and contradicting, conflicting ideas here and there about censorship that you can't really not be against censorship because, like I said earlier, it's more of an individual problem. It's based on a lot of social economical structures that are different in each case.
Okay. Anything to add to that?
Censorship is very subjective to people. So while some people may say do away with censorship completely, some may say that censorship should be made even more strict. So it's a very difficult question as to whether censorship should exist. But I think a compromise should be reached to a certain level. There should be like a compromise of what one person wants and what another person wants.
So, a couple of questions for you guys. So, do you think it's up to us as individuals to accept censorship or work around it? For example, if you feel that a censor's choice on a film is not acceptable to me, I can download it or watch it. But if I feel that a censorship-oriented decision is good for people at large, then I will conform to it. Is that how it works? I mean, if someone says that you cannot go and incite passions by making fiery speeches, then I'll say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So I'll stick to that form of censorship. But if someone says you can't watch Spectre, then I'll say, to hell with you, I'm going to download it and watch it.
But you can't have blanket censorship in a country with so many diverse opinions, with so many like different backgrounds, with people with various education levels, because everyone is ready for whatever that specific person is ready for, and that changes situation to situation. So I think that you just can't have a single law that covers everyone, but at the same time it's really hard to tailor censorship to each person, which is why it's such a controversial thing.
Okay.
Honestly, I disagree with the use of the word censorship when you're talking about, parents telling children what to do and what not to do. For me, that is not censorship. That's essentially parenting, because that's what it is about. It's not really, that the parent is trying to censor the child in any way. It's just the parent is just doing what he or she is supposed to do.
But in that case, the state is also supposed to protect its citizens. So isn't the state just doing what it's supposed to do when it tries to censor things?
But like she said, if there's censorship with reasonable backing of logic, then it's a lot more acceptable when you give us a transparent, set of rules on the basis of which censorship has been performed. It's a lot more acceptable for us as countrymen.
So that's true of parental censorship also, as long as they're transparent and they're
Leo
consistent.
Okay, so I'm just going to play the devil's advocate. And so what you said about censorship should have reasonable backing based on logic. But, so the government's logic to curtailing kissing scenes is, it incites these certain passions in the youth, and that's why they indulge in immoral behaviors. Or say pornography, how it it leads to violence against women. This is not something I believe in. I'm just putting this point across just for the sake of conflict. So in that context, the government also is following a certain logic when it's proposing these censorship guidelines.
Yeah.
Again, this comes back to what I said about we're such a diverse nation that you can't have a blanket rule for censorship. What the government is doing is they're trying to curtail the most uneducated person, the person with the most closed mind and things like that, which we might object to, which is why you can't have one censorship law, because it's not going to appease everyone. What might annoy a Hindu may be perfectly okay by a Muslim. What might be okay by a man would be unacceptable by a woman. What might be okay with someone of a higher socioeconomic standing because they've seen that much more might be completely unacceptable by someone who hasn't seen enough of like the West, which is far more progressive and tolerant. So like you said, that might incite certain violence, but which is why for censorship to be a blanket law, you have to have a perfectly homogenized population, which you can't ever achieve.
Yeah, well, I believe some people are trying to achieve just that in India, but that's a separate story. How are we doing for time? 10 minutes, okay. So I think it's a good time to have some questions for once. In a sharp departure from daily life, parents can ask their children questions. Never happens in real life,
Don't
right?
they do that all the time anyway?
Yeah, yeah, okay, yes. Questions, please? We'd love to have some for the young people here. Yes, can we have, let me get you.
I think there's an assumption been made by the panel that people of a higher socio-economic standing or educated people know more than those who are not. And I strongly disagree, and I think you all should rethink that notion.
Well, if you consider in context that with changing times, people who sort of with their higher social standings, I'm trying not to be prejudiced here, but I think we usually have access to more information, and so we're usually open to changing opinions, whereas people who don't have access to that information, and maybe people who are poorer, maybe people who are more traditional, who don't kind of want to stick
Who
by
don't
that.
venture out of their comfort zone.
Yeah. So so there's a difference there, and I think of course there will be people who will understand censorship. They will think like us. It's not all that everyone on a higher social standing thinks in a certain way, and everyone on a lower social standing thinks in a certain way.
Okay, so I think we shouldn't equate say social standing or wealth with closed-mindedness or open-mindedness. That depends on individuals. So I would also refrain from making general statements like that, because it doesn't matter how rich you are, if you can also be closed-minded, or even how educated you are. A lot of highly educated people can still be closed-minded. So it depends on individuals.
But that being said, when you have a higher level of education, or when you have the means to obtain information, like he said, the chances of you being open-minded are far greater, because you get to see those many more perspectives. You get to hear about so much more that's different from what you may personally believe in, giving you the ability to maybe form a different stand on a topic. It's not to say that it's necessary for you to do that, but it's statistically a higher probability of it happening. So I think that's what we were alluding to.
All right, this will go on. Any other questions? Yes, please.
I'd like to pick on your theme of the Googling, the search that you did, and said you were looking for the transparency of what the guidelines of what you would censor would be. So if you all were a censorship board, what would you be doing? What would you censor and not censor?
Is this with respect to just film or in general?
Just, you're the government, you're the censorship board, you tell me, what would you censor?
Let's say films to keep it a manageable.
Yeah, so with films, what I would do if I were the censor board would make it like the what you're showing on television obviously is to be censored because that's an unrestricted audience where I may just turn on the TV and go like watch a channel and end up on a movie which shows something that may offend me or may lead to some sort of incitement in the audience. But I feel like if it's in cinemas, everyone who goes to a movie theater and watches a specific movie knows what they're getting into. They know, like I know that I'm going to go watch Spectre and there is a good chance that there might be a kissing scene in it. So it's an informed decision that I'm making. So I'd make a distinction in the way that I censor something that's available to the masses and something that's available to just the people who... What would I keep off television?
Let's take a very specific film.
So honestly, I feel like I wouldn't be adequate to make that decision for the simple reason that my mindset is probably very different from that of the majority of this country. What you need on a censorship board is diversity, which is what our censorship board lacks. So you need to have enough people who will be able to bounce what they might find offensive off. Maybe they can hash it out over there in that room, figure out and come to a consensus about what would be the least offensive way to show something without taking away the integrity of the plot.
Okay, so any answers?
No, like she said, we lack that kind of diversity because A, we belong to a particular age group, and B, we come from an urban setting. So I don't think we can deny that we don't know a lot of things that may be acceptable or may be unacceptable in large part of the country, which is rural India.
I feel like I think we probably sensibly would hire more people from different areas to suggest what will be in the film. For example, take Spectre. I thought it was a brilliant film, but I had to see it in the UK because I heard it was censored in India. What I would do is I would get people to look at the film and suggest, here's things that people might find offensive generally. You decide whether you want to see it. I think, like you said, and I think people are smart enough and people are mature enough and intelligent enough, even if their social standings are different, to be able to, after all, their individual views. So they will say, okay, I find this offensive, so I'm just not going to watch it.
So I have a question of you guys. If art is not going to offend anyone, how will new ideas ever come into people's heads? Are we just going to watch the same thing over and over again?
We're not necessarily talking about not offending anyone.
Okay.
I think there's a difference between offending someone and provoking thought and conversation, which I think the latter is what art should do. And offending, okay, so yes, I do agree that there is no speech that cannot offend anyone at all. So I do agree with that as well, because there'll be something people will find offensive, no matter how much you censor it. So, but I still think art should provoke thought and not offend.
Okay, not offend. Yeah, we are done. One last question, anybody? Last question. Yeah.
Hi.
Maybe just see,
Since you represent
could you just come into the
the
aisle?
youth,
Sorry, could you come into the aisle? We can't see you. Yeah, thank you.
since you represent the youth, what would be your each person's take on what you think is offensive?
Okay, great question. I want one quick answer from each of you, as they say in TV. Very quick.
I feel like we can't make that comment because
I'm asking only for you.
Oh,
what
for
would
me
I
personally?
consider?
Yeah,
What I would find offensive is something that threatens national security. Anything beyond that, I feel like it would be okay for the audience to see.
Something that's blatantly sexist or homophobic would.
Sexist or homophobic, okay. Need to be the only thing. It's one of the things you find.
I'd say, again, to agree with her, because I would say anything that's homophobic, anything that's sexist, anything that to me seems going backwards. But it's actually quite a tough question to answer because there's so many different cultures, and there's, for example, in the West they would have a different standing on this.
Let's talk about you.
Okay, in my case, I would also be extremely confused because I live here, and this is my country, but I study in the West, and so When I go there, I would agree with all of it. But then, well, okay, fine.
One thing, anyone.
Any one thing.
Stupidity, for example.
No, that's just no. I can't say. I just can't say. It's quite different for me.
We'll come back to you.
I think I would find anything that harms national integrity offensive in the sense that anything that demeans symbols of democracy like the parliament or, yeah, state buildings. For instance.
Same here. Even I would agree that anything which threatens national unity and integrity of the nation would be offensive to me.
Twitter jokes, are they allowed?
Well, they would be allowed as long as they do not target any particular section of the society.
But they do.
I think I've come up with an answer. So I would find religious intolerance offensive, because my personal view is that everyone has a right to their own religion. So like, for example, the beef ban. I had quite a stand against that, because a lot of people can't eat beef, but then they shouldn't eat beef. There's no need to ban it because other people do eat beef. So any kind of favorism to a certain religion, I think, would be offensive to me.
Okay, that's a wrap. Thank you very much.